You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
All right, everybody. Hello. Can you hear me? Anybody out there? I am back. The extraordinary machine is back for another episode exploring Hae Min Lee's killers press conference yesterday. We're going to talk about a lot of really interesting reactions on Twitter. Some of the same things that I thought, some people saw the same things that I saw yesterday that I was too scared to talk about. And I'm going to be talking about them all today. Since now I have a little bit more courage, I thought, that sounds odd. Maybe, But we're going to be talking about Adnan Syed. Has Rabia Chaudhry flown the coop? Has there been a lover's quarrel between Hae Min Lee's killer and the killer's advocate? Is Adnan Syed thinking about fleeing? All this when we return. Stay tuned. I'm just going to take a quick break. We'll meet you on the other side of the break. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. So yesterday, Adnan gave a nearly 2 hour, just short of 2 hour press conference, lawyerless, in his mother's daycare, which was so bizarre. I think it was Down Rabbit from the Down Rabbit podcast who said he had the book, like, I belong in a zoo, or something about a zoo, right behind him as he's giving his impassioned, or really it was a passionless, very flat affect, very softly spoken, delivered with his mother and brother next to him. But the manipulation was off the charts. The attacks on Hae Min Lee, Kathleen Murphy, the lawyer that I had on this podcast, the Lee family lawyer, Mr. Kelly, absolutely outrageous attacks on both. Who rained on his fraud? Brian Frosh, the Attorney General's office, although now they have this new Attorney General. And one of my big takeaways from yesterday is that fairness in our courts is really a dying thing. Our courts are becoming kangaroo courts. The Brian Froshes of this world, the more fair-minded people, are retiring, leaving office, and being replaced by innocence fraudsters like Marilyn Mosby, who is on trial for fraud. And many people, I don't think you have to be a conspiracy theorist to wonder if something went on behind the scenes. Certainly, you need a lot of money in a court battle, right? The way that this was just rubber stamped and pushed through. So she was put in to do the bidding of convicted killers like Adnan Syed, and she was happy to even vacate vacate his conviction before it could ever really be challenged. So, meaning the whole charge is dropped. She dropped everything. So it was vacated first, and they were going to retry him, and then they just possibly retry him, and then with this explosive new evidence, and then she just got rid of everything. So it couldn't even be challenged. I mean, really tricky stuff. I mean, this is what we're going to be seeing more and more, but with no one stopping it, with everyone green lighting it, applauding it, and our media staying silent, happy to applaud these giant grifts, legal grifts. It's outrageous. So, little bit like, I was asking yesterday, is this as good as it gets? Is it only going to get worse from now on? And if Americans don't wake up and realize it's really important who you vote for district attorney or state's attorney, whatever you call it in your state, we are going to have a justice system that re-victimizes victims, participates in frauds, awards killers with very little rubber stamps, these giant payouts, one after another, at a much bigger rate than what we have now, if people don't start waking up and realize that this is not a sexy issue, but it's a really important one. And I'm really happy to see the phrase innocence fraud appearing, coming out of people's mouths, people writing about it, people talking about it. But I think everybody's shying away from what it really is. This is a criminal movement. It's organized fraud. These are the equivalent of gangsters. So let's take a look at what some people said. Let's start with Sword and Scale, who's very controversial. But I thought he had a really interesting take on Twitter, and I refuse to call it X. I'm sorry. So he says, I don't think Rabia believes in Adnan anymore. I think something happened. She's suddenly silent, not saying a word. If you know anything about this magnificent ego-driven creature, that's not like her. Then Adnan does this weird press conference today where he plays victim and everyone rolls their eyes and sighs. I think she knows he's guilty. Advised him not to do it, and being the strong, independent man that he is, sarcasm, they had a lover's quarrel. Support for this convicted murderer is fading fast, despite really good storytelling by the media. And good on him for bringing up the media's complicity in this. I wonder how the people who gave Sarah Koenig the Peabody Award feel now when they realize it was all a giant fraud, or did they realize it before they gave her the Peabody Award? You know, there's a human element where we always want to look at the best side of things. And that's another reaction I saw to yesterday's press conference, which was, oh, I think Adnan Syed has convinced himself he's innocent. And that's certainly a nice, happy way of looking at it, like, oh, he's just deluded. But I see him as a psychopath. He's home, he's with his parents, who are probably sitting right on top of him all the time. He can't do any of the fun, grifty stuff he did in prison. And he's bored. And that was the other impression I got, was sort of, Bruce Springsteen's song Glory Days, like people whose the height of their life was high school, and they become sort of paunchy and middle-aged and think back to those great days. Was the feeling I got when Adnan Syed was going over his positive decisions that he got after Serial came out. And you do notice none of those positive decisions from the court came before Serial came out, all after the public pressure was put on the courts. That is one element of how this movement works. We like to think our courts work in a vacuum, and that won't have any influence. They're so fair. They don't know about Serial. They don't know about Adnan Syed. And I just wanted to look. And then the other reaction that I was too shy to share yesterday was the fact that, this is what Sword and Sail said on Twitter, was that Adnan Syed is going to flee. Thinks he's going to flee to Pakistan. I think, and there was a moment where he's talking about the upcoming hearing on the 5th, and he's like, we intend to be there on the 5th, and we will be there. He just said it in a very awkward way, like, of course you're going to be there. You have to announce that isn't that a given that you're going to be there? And all this concentration in the beginning of his speech, I don't know, what do you call that, presentation? Where he's talking about how everyone was too bigoted when at his bail hearing over 2 decades ago. He's talking about his bail hearing, that he was a victim of Islamophobia at his bail hearing. So, and that he never intended to flee, etc., etc. But if you follow me on Twitter, I put up a tweet with the pictures, right, of that they found, the newly taken passport pictures found in his home when the law enforcement raided it after Hae Min Lee's murder. So I understand that he doesn't have a passport. That's my understanding. And thank you, Rob Chadwick, for I think this was a conversation for clarifying that. I think he's the one who clarified and said he doesn't have a passport now. But I'm sure I wouldn't think he would want to use his own passport. I think he would flee in more nefarious ways, no? But maybe my imagination is getting away with me. But that's what I was thinking about. He's at least fantasizing about it. But the psychopathy was on full display. The narcissism, the ego, and the absolute hatred he has for everyone, including Hae Min Lee's family, including their lawyer. And he's so jealous at every time that anyone else had a platform to speak. He mentioned the Intercept articles, the few interviews that Kelly gave. And he's like, he went all around. He gave all these interviews. I think he gave maybe 3 short interviews, 2 or 3 short interviews to the local media and maybe a couple print interviews. That's a PR tour and my podcast. In a half an hour interview on my podcast. Boy, that's something. He's had he's had a platform on the biggest podcast in the world, and he's worried about Steve Kelly. This guy has no conscience. None. And everything is very managed, but you can see the mask came off yesterday. The eye twitches, the stuttering. Anytime money was mentioned, he's also very upset that if this conviction stands and he doesn't have to go back to prison, that bars him from any kind of civil suit. It's not enough that he'll probably get book deals. And Netflix deals and who knows what else, host his own podcast. We love to make murderers celebrities in this country. Look at Amanda Knox, $10,000 a pop for that psychopath to speak to your group so she can lie to you for an hour. Same thing here. We have no problem. We have no Son of Sam laws anymore. Thanks, Henry Hill from Goodfellas and Nick Pileggi, who wanted to make the movie Goodfellas from the book Wise Guys. So we don't have any Son of Sam laws. We don't have any laws on the books that say you can't make money from your crimes in this country. And we've really lost our way morally. I'm thinking about the people yesterday, the journalists in the room with Adnan Syed. I'm thinking, is the hair on the back of their neck standing up? Do they realize that they are in a room with a man who bragged about killing his girlfriend with his own bare hands? But Sarah Koenig introduced, but we know Adnan, right? We know Adnan. It's Adnan. We don't know Hae Min Lee, but we know Adnan. Oh, good old Adnan, because we're on a first name basis with him. This is how insidious this movement is with their language. It's sick. So no, Sarah Koenig is not well-meaning. She's not biased. She's fully on board, has no conscience, doesn't mind, is in it to make her career and make as much blood money as she can get from this story. And there's Adnan Syed yesterday saying this isn't a victim's rights issue. It's all about me. He's all mad that the lawyer for the woman that he killed wants to keep him in prison. He's all mad that they don't care about his family. Let's take a look at just the last couple minutes of the Adnan Syed press conference when we return. Stay tuned. See you on the other side of the break. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Okay. Actually, let me just finish up real quickly before we get into Adnan Syed's press conference. Let's just look at just a couple more reactions. I really had a good time looking at people's reactions on Twitter. And either, I'm sure Twitter has changed quite a bit since Serial came out. But if any of these reactions had come out at the height of Serial's popularity and the height of the support for Adnan Syed, these people would have been harassed into oblivion. So it's really nice to see the tide turning. So Down Rabbit says, Adnan doesn't have an alibi. A topic today, his dad and Bilal said, an ex-offender said he was at the mosque. Asia's letters are likely fabricated, but wouldn't give a crime time alibi anyway. Coach Syed testified he couldn't be sure if Adnan was at track. But he said Adnan had a presser in a kiddie room today to ask the Maryland AG to investigate prosecutorial misconduct. And he uses Elizabeth Worthington from Elizworth News. That's her handle. She says a spokesperson for Kathleen Murphy, the new enemy that Adnan Syed definitely doesn't want his supporters to harass. Don't harass Kathleen Murphy, spelled K-A-T. Definitely, I thought maybe that's what all that heavy winking on one eye was. Maybe that's what he was trying to tell his audience. Definitely don't harass her, right? Says judges cannot comment on impending cases, and the Attorney General's office says he does not have the authority to investigate allegations of prosecutorial misconduct. So big fail there for Adnan Cochran. That's what I'm going to call him. Down Rabbit also pointed out that Adnan Syed had made a QR code for his presentation. So, he knows about marketing. He knows about branding. And you could tell from his thing, he's hitting for, I was incarcerated for 24 years for a crime I didn't commit. I was saying if it was a drinking game, we would have all been drunk after, the first 10 minutes. Someone put in the comments, we'd all be dead. And by the end, from alcohol poisoning. Okay, here's Down Rabbit. Adnan is holding this insane, rambling press conference where he hopes to not go back to jail with a children's book in the background, upside down. The book is titled, Put Me in the Zoo. It's so perfect. It's just like, karma or fate or whatever you think. What a lucky coincidence. So let's take a look at Adnan Syed. You can see I'm stalling. It's so tedious and troubling to me that I'm stalling on it, but it's only a couple minutes and I think it needs going over. The other thing is, why is Adnan Syed not being monitored at all? He's a convicted killer. Why is he not on some kind of probation? Is it just like, well, you're so famous, if you heard anybody and they live, they're going to identify you. I don't know what they're thinking of, but maybe I don't understand. Maybe he is out on some, but what I heard is that he's free to do whatever he wants. He's certainly free to teach at Georgetown University. And shame on them. Shame on them. They are becoming the university to send your kids if you want them to learn how to be a psychopath or a murderer from a real psychopathic murderer. They've got two on staff there. They've got Adnan Syed, who's a convicted killer, and Marty Tankleff, a formerly convicted killer who got his conviction for killing his adoptive parents, Arlene and Seymour Tankleff, overturned on technicalities. Then he hired Lonnie Surrey, the West Memphis Three's PR agent, to propagandize the whole world and call himself an exoneree, including getting an exonerated license plate. It's just like if we say it enough, it is. If the press doesn't fact check anything and puts this out, I'm not saying they don't fact check. They know there's another side. They just don't care about it. They know that they could reach the victim's family or the victim's family's lawyer or the prosecutor in a case. They just don't care about it. There's no popularity, there's no money, and there's no fame in standing up for victims. So let's take a look at this from yesterday, his vengeful press conference. And so, no, I do not think Adnan Syed has convinced himself that he's innocent. I think he thinks every day about what he did to Hae Min Lee. I think he fantasizes about it in gruesome and disturbing ways we can't imagine, not having that mindset ourselves. But really, I mean, the words that came to mind were passing fancy. This guy was a passing fancy. And men never pick up on when their time is over, right? He's still thinking it's 2015, 2016.
He actually experienced a horrible tragedy when he was a teenager. He lost his sister to a crime of violence, and he's dedicated his life to speaking up for victims' rights. And I respect that. Our family, we respect that. You know, what we take issue with is that over the past several months, when we've gone to court, Mr. Kelly has never once acknowledged our family. He's never once acknowledged my mom. He's never once acknowledged my younger brother or my dad or any of us.
How dare the lawyer of the family of the woman you killed doesn't want to acknowledge you or your family? That's the one person who hasn't thought about you and your family. The whole world for the past, what is it? Is it 2014 Serial came out? 10 years? Is that right, guys? Let me know in the comments. Have been concerned with you and your family's feelings. You had the biggest podcast in the world dedicated to you and your feelings and your unfair trial, quote unquote, LOL.
You know, we feel that Mr. Kelly should not have the right to pick and choose who victims are, that he should recognize all victims.
I mean, doesn't this sound like some woke nonsense? I'd like to self-identify as a victim. Please respect my pronouns. This is nuts. This is really, really nuts. And just the absolute venom you can feel just simmering like a volcano simmering under the surface, ready to just flow out. Just the hatred he has. The hatred he has. And that the hatred this whole movement has. Because they're the ones that ruin things for them. They're the ones that come to court. They're the ones that give the victim impact statements that that convince the judge to give them the longer sentences. They're the ones who take away a tiny little bit of the spotlight, just the tiniest little bit. Adnan Syed wants all the sympathy, all the attention, all the money. And it'd be really interesting to see, talk about no honor among thieves, how it goes down between Adnan and Rabia. Because they really seem very much like two peas in a pod, in a psychopathic pod.
And I think particularly, again, we have the utmost respect and compassion for the tragedy that he went through. And we appreciate the line of work that he's dedicated himself to.
Boy, wasn't that a sincere delivery? We have the most compassion for what he went through. Oh, do you? That really was sincere. This guy is like just without any remorse. Any remorse. And all I can think back to is Sarah Koenig. Oh, you're a really nice guy. That's what you put in serial from her phone calls. I think you're a really nice guy, Adnan. Wonder how she feels now. See, that wasn't put in for, and Adnan, and you know what Adnan says right after that? You don't know me. Not thanks so much. That's nice to hear. Any of those deflections would work. But he rejects the notion that he's a nice guy. No, you don't know me. You don't know that I replay the greatest moment of my life was the moment that I killed Hae Min Lee. That was when I was having the most fun. Winning. It's about winning and revenge for this cat psychopath.
Doing. But what I wish he would understand is that, and what was hard for us to understand is that at that hearing, Miss Becky Feldman, she was representing the state. So for Stephen Kelly to accuse her of not caring about victims' rights, for Stephen Kelly to essentially accuse Miss Feldman of colluding with the judge and my attorney, with having a hearing that was trampling on the rights of Haye's family, as if she doesn't care about victims.
Did you just hear that? Did you just hear what he said? At a hearing that was trampling on the rights of the victim's family. Little slip there, Adnan. Did everybody hear that? I know it's really low. I tried to fix the sound the best I can. It's really interesting that he did this press conference and he bothered to make a QR code. He bothered to put on a tie, but he didn't bother to get a little microphone. Maybe, I mean, what if he starts giving these like every week? What if it's like the killer's address every week? And is the press generally, what I saw, ignored it. They either played it in its entirety, but I didn't see many articles written about it. Maybe I missed a lot of them. Let me know. It's like nobody wants to, it was just such a bad moment for this movement and and when I say this movement, I mean the wrongful conviction movement, and I mean the movement to, and I also mean the movement to free Adnan Syed. Both. I mean, they're one and the same. But what he's doing is the ultimate projection. But right there, that's a slip.
Rights. There's been many articles been published about Miss Feldman, that to say that Miss Feldman doesn't care about victims' families, she is a victim's family. Miss Feldman lost her brother to a crime of violence. So we just can't imagine it hurt us. We can't imagine.
She is a victim's family. I think he means she had a family member who was a victim. Listen to how hard that is for Adnan to say. No? He has a lot of grammatical errors in this too. She is because also he'll always use the term lost. She lost her brother. He never wants to use the term murdered. Steve Kelly's sister was murdered, not he lost to a crime. Like it just like I don't know. Like sort of like the crime was a wind and it just swept her up.
Imagine how much it must have hurt her throughout the past year to hear essentially these arguments being made, and she was the one who handled this case, that she doesn't care about victims' families, when she herself, she is a victim's family. And we would ask that Stephen Kelly respectfully consider that when he says the things that he says publicly, that he would take our family into consideration.
That can you imagine saying that with no irony? We're just like I said it yesterday, but I'll say it again. He's still living. Thanks to Adnan Syed. I think at one point he says, I think it was a news story on the case. They said he spent 24 years, he spent most of his life in prison. And I thought, Hae Min Lee has spent most of her life 6 feet under, thanks to most of Adnan's life 6 feet under, thanks to Adnan Syed. The other thing is he calls that everyone picked up on immediately in my audience was that Adnan called Hae Min Lee his friend, not his ex-girlfriend, because it's much more unlikely that a friend is going to kill their friend, right? One friend kills another, then a jealous ex-boyfriend kills his ex-girlfriend.
And so just to conclude, basically just real short, we're asking the Attorney General's office, Mr. Brown, to please conduct an investigation into these new pieces of information that we've presented. We're going to submit a letter to Mr. Brown outlining everything that we've said and making a formal request. We would just ask that Mr. Brown consider the fact that the previous administration, that the Attorney General's office is supposed to conduct itself in an unbiased and an objective way to review justice and review convictions in this case. And the Attorney General's office is not supposed to act as Kathleen Murphy's personal attorney. The Attorney General's office is not supposed to exist to protect Kathleen Murphy and Kevin Urich from accountability. And
see, the way he's presenting this is, I'm so innocent. It's so obvious to everyone. The only reason that Kathleen Murphy or Kevin Urich would want to protect my conviction and reinstate my conviction is because they don't want this investigation to go forward. I mean, this is tinfoil hat time, but he wants to rally up the troops. The other thing I heard yesterday, and I thought of it too, was that he wants money. He's got to get this conviction totally vacated and clear the way for a civil lawsuit. And sometimes they do more than one, where he can clean up and make millions, just like his mentor, Marty Tankleff, walked away with millions. 2 different lawsuits. think it totaled something like 10 million. That's just my memory of it, something close to that figure. And I'd like to make a correction. I said yesterday, I put it in the show notes that I think I said there were 100 people who were willing to lie for Adnan. It was 80 people. And I put a link up to the letter that they wrote, willing to lie for Adnan and give him an alibi from the mosque at the time that Hae Min, right after Hae Min Lee was murdered and Adnan Syed was facing charges.
We're just asking that, please, that they be held to the same standard that anyone else in Maryland would be. That if Kathleen Murphy and Kevin Urick, if they were two young African-American boys in some urban city, they would be in jail charged with conspiracy.
Oh, yeah, because they look at them. That's how the justice system works, right? There's one justice system for white people and one justice system for Black people. I don't have to prove anything I am saying. I just have to say it and make it sound good. Sounds good. Because there are racist people in the world, that means that our system at its core is fundamentally, systematically racist, even though in this vague way that I can't really pinpoint.
With the amount of evidence that we're able to present. So we have a tremendous amount of respect for Mr. Brown. He has a long history of standing up for Maryland families, and we're just asking that he please stand up for our family as well. We're not asking for any public announcement. We know there's a hearing coming up on October 5th. We respect the courts. We respect the appellate courts, and we're going to be there on October 5th. And we're going to respect whatever decision that court makes. If that court makes a decision that I have to return to prison, I'm going to be there.
He's going to be there. There's that thing. That's what made me think he's going to flee. I'm going to be there. I'm going to respect. I mean, we'd assume that you would, that once they put the cuffs on you and you have to go back to prison, that you would respect that. But honestly, I did not even think this in woke Baltimore was even a possibility, really, realistically. I knew it was a possibility, but really, I thought it was maybe the smallest chance he'd get sent back to prison. And more likely what would happen is that they would give him time served and do something like that and wipe their hands clean of it. And it would be sort of like an Alfred plea like ending, which is really interesting because Rabia Chaudhry based her advocacy for Adnan Syed on the West Memphis 3 PR campaign, including the documentaries. She didn't know anyone in showbiz. The only person closest to showbiz was Sarah Koenig. And boy, was it was the right time. It was the right message that the left wanted to put out, right? The MacArthur Foundation, who funds the channel, this supports the public radio channel, This American Life, which is Serial's a spinoff of. Those are the kind of charities that they support. Things to, quote, end mass incarceration, which sounds great until this is what ending mass incarceration looks like. It actually can look a lot worse, means taxpayers have to pay killers millions for their totally rightful conviction. And you never see the victim's family. Sometimes, like in the case of Johnny Lee Gates, they're all gone or dead. And sometimes they're just too broken and traumatized by the whole thing, including this re-traumatization that the system that they get when their killer gets let out and gets made a folk hero and a multimillionaire. It's too much. They can't speak.
There, I'm going to be in prison. And I'll be right there. As we've been for 24 years, we don't have anything to hide. We're a family. We've suffered so much, all due to a wrongful conviction that had nothing to do with Hey's murder. And we fought so hard for all these years to try to prove that I was innocent, but also to get justice for Heyy and justice for her family.
Oh, that's what that was. That's what that was. So Serial really, that was all about Hae Min Lee and her family. That was your crusade for Heyy. You whining about how you should have taken a plea deal, even though you were innocent, you'd already been out, and how you now being wrongfully convicted makes you feel like you have to prove everything you said, man. Right? But as I pointed out on this podcast, that was a first really big red flag, is that he sounded like every single grifter that I've ever really, like, street hustler that I've ever had the displeasure to come across in my life. And I couldn't believe nobody couldn't hear that either. You know, proving things is really very central to a criminal mindset. Criminals know that they can do things that you just can't prove. Like, for example, when you're in a room with them and your wallet goes missing, there's only 2 of you in the room. Right? You didn't misplace it, but you can't prove that they did it because you didn't see them do it. They live for the loophole. They live for it.
And the last thing that I'll say, just to reiterate, we absolutely are not saying that Hey's family did anything wrong. Young Lee absolutely had the right to contact Kathleen, to speak to her, however that went down. He had the right to retain any lawyer that he wanted to. We support that, and we completely don't want anyone contacting Young Lee or we don't want anything to involve their family unless they want to speak about it or not. We respect that.
Wait. So he just said that he was angry that when they did speak about it through their lawyer, which is appropriate, completely appropriate, that they have their lawyer give interviews and get out their side of the story. Yet here he is on the thing criticizing them. Did he not just criticize Kelly for speaking out? Now he's saying they can give as many interviews as they want. What a bunch of nonsense. All right, I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll finish this up and we will look at this horrible, terrible, corrupt Attorney General's office, AG's office. And that is said with much sarcasm when we get back. Stay tuned. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. MW, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. These super stickers, really appreciate it. Help support the show. Help me spread the word about Innocence Fraud. I super appreciate it. Let's look at the rest of this. Boy, it always feels so good when I'm doing these things on Adnan Syed, when I have to hear him talk, this psychopath talk ad nausea, to take a break. Like, I never have such relieving breaks as I do when I'm listening to this killer hold forth. Oh my. Let's really try to finish this up.
Only asking that the Attorney General's office speak to Mr. Stephen Kelly, Ms. Kathleen Murphy, Mr. Kevin Urich, and any other attorneys who have filed motions in this case to determine if Kathleen Murphy at the Attorney General's office was involved in the strategizing and essentially trying to protect this conviction as opposed to securing justice. So I really appreciate everybody. I'm so sorry. I know this took a long time, but I really wanted to present, as a family, we wanted to present the information so everyone can make their own judgment. I did, I put this actually as a QR code. If anyone wants to scan it, then I believe that it should, well, not I believe, it does work. It'll pull up the PDF of the entire presentation that I just made. So if anyone wants to do that, feel free. I'll leave it up right now. And I don't know if you guys wanted to take a break, or I'm sorry. I know it's almost 1:30. So again, I apologize for
the former honor student, the convicted killers made a QR code. Yeah, let's just watch the end. I think
lengthiness of this,
but can we refresh that he was let out on the biggest fraud that I've ever witnessed in real time, which was, and when he mentions Becky Feldman, she's from the Innocence Project, former defense lawyer, assistant state's attorney. So he's like, but she's the assistant state's attorney and she's a family member of a victim's family member herself. But this is a whole nother kind of DA, assistant DA, state's attorney, assistant state's attorney, whatever you want to call it, whatever your state calls it, that we've seen before. And when he pulled up Steve Kelly's argument and where he was getting asked tough questions and he was stumbling a bit, that was just absolutely to shame him and say, look how foolish and look how unlawful. He doesn't even know the law. But we're in unprecedented territory here. We've always had a balanced justice system. It hasn't always been perfect because human beings have created it, run it, right? We have flaws, we make mistakes, we're not perfect. But geez, was that about shaming him? We've never seen anything like this before. Who would get this idea? Who would be evil and dark and sinister enough to come up with such a sinister idea as, let's get district's attorneys in there who work against the victim's interests and against the people's interests and for the killer's interests, convicted killer's interests, and for the accused killer's interests. Who would be dark and cynical enough to come up with that? Only this movement. And for those who say, like, I don't know if it's this bad, they say they're doing good, they say they're out for justice. You haven't looked into it. You don't know. And you know what? You're free to look into it. If you have a different impression, I don't know. I'd probably think you're crazy. Because the more I've looked into this, the darker it gets. The bottom is bottomless. And the fraud that got Adnan Syed was about the bottom of the barrel, criminal fraud. Getting him out on that DNA from the Hae Min Lee's shoes, the bottom of her shoes, not even on her feet in her car. And a wit and the notes from the prosecutor, from a witness describing Adnan Syed himself. So a witness describing Adnan Syed's menacing behavior towards Hae Min Lee before Hae Min Lee was killed is evidence of Adnan Syed's great innocence. And there was one point where he goes, well, even if you don't think I'm innocent, even if you just think I got didn't get a fair trial. So it means like everybody who supports this movement and supports this side of politics. So maybe you think I did it, but come on, you know how corrupt people in power are. You know these politicians and DAs and state's attorneys, assistants, except the assistant state attorney when they come from the Innocence Project and do my bidding, except those kinds of state's attorneys. Those are the really clear-headed, rational ones who can see the truth. It's absurd, but they met in secret. They conspired to keep young Lee out of this hearing by sending him the Zoom link and insinuating that was the only way that he was welcome to participate in it when he had a right to be there. And how dare they? How dare they? How dare they put their criminal behavior on everybody else, projected on everybody else?
We'd be more than happy. We appreciate everyone coming, and we'd be more than happy to answer questions. We just ask that perhaps that everyone gets a chance to ask their questions, if everyone could please, because it's been a couple hours. We haven't had a chance to check on my dad. So again, if you guys, I don't know if you want to take a break or we can just go right to. Yes, sir. That would be great. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. So in 5 minutes, is that's okay with everybody? Yeah.
If I say sir enough, maybe you think I'm innocent. See, really, really polite people don't go to prison, and they certainly aren't sent back to prison. And if he really cared about his family so much, why did he kill Hae Min Lee? And if he really cared about Hae Min Lee's family so much, why did they kill their daughter or their sister? It's just so unfair that this guy got to be a celebrity and Hae Min Lee is forgotten and re-victimized and thrown under the bus and put out rumors about and put down, have the man she really loved at the end of her life, Don, hunted, harassed. This movement has no conscience. It's like the psychopaths it represents. It's a movement totally without conscience and morals.
Police came by earlier saying that the cars are parked kind of.
Oh, so
yeah.
Yikes.
So maybe like a 2-3 minute break or something.
Oh, okay. Oh, it went off. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I know I parked mine in your driveway.
Oh, yeah. So if anyone wanted to, I don't. Yeah.
He's like, oh, but I want more attention. They're like, Adnan, we just gave you Adnan. I'm sure they called him Adnan. And you see, I'm calling him Adnan now too. Adnan Syed, we gave you 2 hours, dude. It's enough. I think I really lost track of time. This has been going on quite long. I wanted to look at Brian Frosh's stuff really quickly when we come back. If you've stayed with me, thank you so much. Be back after the break. Please hit the thumbs up, guys. Subscribe to the channel. Support the channel by becoming a Patreon for as little as a cappuccino. You can get all sorts of cool, exclusive content. Link is in the description. Be back after the break. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. All right, one of the really funny things while I'm pulling up this Brian Frosch's interview is that there was a time after they totally vacated Adnan Syed's conviction before it was reinstated. There was a time when Jay Wilde was still on the books after he took a plea deal for being accessory to a murder that apparently wasn't committed. Right? It's really odd that they didn't quietly just vacate his conviction. And that's never talked about, even though I really tried to get the conversation going with my Justice for Jay Wilde memes. And I was really asking the question, why? I mean, it doesn't even make any sense, right? But that happens all the time. It doesn't matter to this movement. This is a movement that only looks good if you don't know anything. The more you know about the cases, and when I say I haven't found a case of innocence of the cases that I've looked at, I've seen some cases that seem like they look promising, but you never know until you get into the nitty-gritty and get into the case files what it's really about, because this movement leaves so much out. So it always sounds good, sort of good on the surface, until you start becoming aware of the repetition, the buzzwords, all-white jury, crime he always said he didn't commit. That is the norm. Very few of these psychopaths stand up and say, I did it. Okay.
Fighting for justice, the Attorney General questions the handling of the Adnan Syed case and criticizes how city prosecutors notified the victim's family. Hello, I'm Denise Koch.
And I'm Vic Carter. Welcome to those of you watching on CBS News Baltimore and on WJZ-TV.
A judge released Adnan Syed last month after he served more than 20 years in prison for the killing of Hae Min Lee, whose body was found in Leakin Park, but the case did not end there.
In a new court filing, Attorney General Brian Frosch challenges.
So WJZ is very, very, very much on Adnan Syed's side. And you can see this in the language that they use.
The state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby. He cites several exclusive WJZ interviews.
So we've been following every development in this case, and WJZ investigator Mike Helgren, he's live at the Cummings Courthouse downtown with today's new war of words. Mike.
And Denise and Vic, it remains to be seen whether the Court of Special Appeals will take any action based on the Attorney General's arguments. But the Attorney General criticized a lot, including what he called the extraordinary speed that this case moved through the court system. Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosch slams Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby in a new court filing over her handling of the Adnan Syed case. Frosch claims Mosby's office did not treat the family of murder victim Hae Min Lee with dignity, respect, and sensitivity, failing to give them...
That's where they're stuck. It's really hard to argue that they gave dignity, they treated the Lee family with dignity and sensitivity when they were like, we're not going to even postpone our party by a week. We've got everybody ready to go on the courthouse steps. See, that's what young Lee was saying in his Zoom hearing. And the judge, Melissa Fenn, who had met in secret in an in-camera meeting, that's what it's called. So funny. It's that it's exactly the opposite of what it sounds like. It is an meeting totally off the record, no court reporter present, no one recording it, totally met in secret to conspire, right, on Monday's hearing. So when Monday rolled around, the odd men out were young Lee on Zoom and Steve Kelly there in person. And they thought they could successfully keep them all out. Oh, we'll see you on Zoom. They knew that that was going to be the problem. That was the fly. What is it? The fly in the ointment, right? Is that a right use of that expression? That was the thing that was going to ruin everything for them. It's the victim's family. And Adnan Syed hates them for that. He hates Steve Kelly for that. That was about humiliating. I mean, he hates young Lee. Because if it weren't for young Lee, Adnan Syed probably be doing Coca-Cola commercials or something by now.
Proper notice they were moving to throw out Syed's conviction. The fact that communications with the Lee family fell so shockingly short of best practices is illuminating, he says. Frosh also attacked Mosby's claims that handwritten notes about 2 suspects, including one who threatened to kill Lee, were withheld from prosecutors for years, what's known as a Brady violation, saying no one ever contacted anyone from the Office of the Attorney General who was involved in the prosecution of the case. And remarkably, the state's attorney's office did not even speak with Kevin Urich, the author of the notes upon which the allegation of the egregious Brady violation is based.
So for everyone out there to understand this fraud, see, they didn't call him, like, if you were really investigating something, like you would do if you were really investigating something, hey, Mr. Urich, what was this note about, if you were honest? They know that that note is purposely vague. They know what it's about, and I'm talking about Erica Sutter's law students. That's Adnan Syed's lawyer. She leads the Innocence Project Clinic, which is students, investigators, even though they have no training in investigating anything, can't investigate their way out of a paper bag. And boy, the Anthony Porter all-story Simon story taught us that. It's super dangerous to do, but Anthony Porter being wrongfully let out of prison didn't stop those kind of Innocence Project clinics popping up from university to university, from Georgetown with Marty Tankleff to Northwestern, Medial Innocence Journalism School with their Innocence Project, all over the country. Getting out, and they have endless resources and people and time to work all day long to get these convicted killers out of prison. And the reason, and Adnan Syed talks about the plea deal and how he wasn't allowed to speak about the plea deal that he was offered. He didn't want to take it because by Urich, but he didn't want to take it because if I'm remembering, I thought it was Urich. He didn't want to take it because he had a war chest of money. He had an army of supporters. He was in a better position not to take it. That's why he didn't take it, because Adnan Syed always does what's best for Adnan Syed, no matter who it's going to hurt. So what they're doing here is they're projecting their own criminal actions onto everybody else, because the fraud is going to be exposed, or is in danger of being exposed, next month at that hearing. And boy, do they seem nervous.
In the filing, Frosh says Mosby's office selectively quoted one of the allegedly undisclosed notes describing the threat against Ms. Lee, but did not quote the remainder of the note, which suggested that the caller did not take the threat seriously. Frosh cited his interview with WJZ.
The folks that I've spoken to and that our office has spoken to say the notes were produced. But more importantly, I have to say, we gave them to her. That's where she got them in the first place. We're not withholding them from anybody.
Mosby has repeatedly and strongly denied any allegations that Lee's family was improperly notified, and she says she acted appropriately in moving to throw out the conviction and clearing Syed and Lee's murder when new DNA tests excluded him.
We used advanced DNA to determine that it was not Adnan Syed. We got DNA this time.
A Maryland appeals court must now decide whether to...
We got DNA. We just don't just say we got DNA. And that, oh, you have DNA. That sounds really good. From the soles of Hae Min Lee's shoes from her car. I think they're all looking for a foot fetishist who would massage the bottom of her shoes.
To take up the Attorney General's concerns with Syed free and cleared of wrongdoing in the 1999 killing. Syed's defense attorneys say the Attorney General's office should not be part of the case at this point. Lee's family tells us they'll have another court filing on Thursday in the case. Live at the Cummings Courthouse, Mike Halgren, WJZ.
Okay. So I think that about does it for today, guys. But if you have any doubt that what this is about revenge, attention, a true expression of his psychopathy. And what an awkward, just the visual. This is our loving family, our together family. And there's Adnan on one side. The mother and the brother are sitting very stiffly away from each other, very far apart on the couch. Boy, isn't that the portrait of a loving, close, caring family? Someone else suggested that they had it in Adnan Syed's mother's daycare to promote her daycare, so more money for her. Thought that was funny. What I thought it was about was, see, we're a really great family, and I'm a really great guy. My mom, she takes care of little kids. I used to help her out. So, I couldn't have killed anybody. That's what it's about. Image management at its finest for a really dangerous and deranged psychopath. And he found his movement because the movement is like the killers it's trying to get out of prison. See you back here real soon. Have a great one, everybody.